All right, super hyped. Money Never Sleeps, episode 18. I got to thank our audience. Di and I were talking, and we couldn't be more thankful. We're blessed. We have between 4,000 and 7,000 viewers, and sometimes over a show, and had up to like over 50,000 impressions on some of the shows. And the only reason that happens is because of all you. And so the support we've had and the support for digital art and people in the space and the show is just, I couldn't be more thankful. So thank you. On that note, what's interesting is Jack, I was watching one of his interviews and he said, hey, when people have 100 viewers, they should be happy, because imagine having to sit down with 100 different people and tell them the story. And so I think one of the things we try to do here is just bring in people who've done really cool stuff in the space to try to lift up the space. And here we have Jack. So the first thing I want to talk about today, just as a group, is how are you guys feeling about digital art and NFTs right now? Positive, negative, level of engagement, interest? I think you see a lot on the timeline, and there's been a lot of successes and a lot of whiffs. So what's on your guys' mind? What are you looking at? What are you excited or not excited about?
I'll let Jack go first. Do it up. Oh, you're on mute. The classic corporate trope, dude.
There you go. I was letting the intro run without any slurping or sniffing.
I was going to say, I think he just gave the meaning of life right there on mute, and then we all got fucked, and now we're never going to hear it again. Go for it first, dude.
Man, honestly, I don't. It's the cliche answer is it's just endless source of material and inspiration regardless. And I'm curious for Die's take on this too, but it's like almost the worse the sentiment gets and the more chaotic the timeline gets, the more you have to think about, work with, respond to. It's just gets funnier. But I don't know. I always have this maybe not negative reaction, but just can't really grapple with when people refer to it as a one overarching thing too. I've sort of found myself in this through way of a bunch of different accidents, and the thing I wake up wanting to do or mess around with or respond to is this. So just there's I guess the TLDR of that answer is neutral almost, or just wake up and do it anyway.
There's a bunch of stuff, and it's not one thing. I find opportunities that excite me or don't, and fuck with that.
Well, yeah, and I think there's having been maybe full time thinking about this for 2 years or 2.5 years, is once you've sort of experienced the tumultuous nature of it in general, that numbs you really to the violent motions of it, in the same way that I think people involved in crypto in general, if you exposed somebody who keeps their majority of their savings in a bank account to the swings in something like crypto assets over a day, it's can't stomach it, too volatile. And that's that happens on a narrative front too, as a function of everything else that's going on, because we're playing around in this world that is not conventionally acknowledged, accepted, etc. So it comes with the territory, I guess.
I like to say crypto used to be free. We're French crypto, so we're French squared. Di, what's your take?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that was I thought that was a lovely sentiment, where it's the sicker and more perverse and psychotic it is, it's it's so easy to just feed on, dude. We're just sitting there and just feasting on these different pieces of carrion that are rotting out in a fucking highway in the sun. And the more rank and filthy and disgusting it gets out there, the easier it is and the funner it is. Honestly, it's fuck, I'm gonna make something insane. When it's boring, it sucks, because when I'm doing daily good meat, or when I'm figuring out funny ass derivatives or something, it's just there's nothing to do. It's oh, now I'm gonna work on something actual that matters or makes sense. But I think that there's such immense comedy and such hilarity in the madness and the psychosis and the franticness of us all sprinting in 1,000 different miles at all times. So to not observe that and to not like cherish that is, I think it would be foolish, and also I think it's like Jack was saying. Well, I don't do this full time, but like the alternative is sitting there and like grinding out, which is what I do now anyways, but is grinding out a 9 to 5 job that just fucking sucks, and it like eats you alive every day versus you doing some of the eating and like, you know, actually enjoying yourself and shooting the shit with people that you respect or like inspire you, or versus just like just for the colleagues who have nothing to offer, you know? So like I look at it in some ways like a psychedelic, fucked out, crazy office place that we're all just like going nuts in, versus, you know, like, so yeah, I don't know. That's my take. I'm forever happy as fuck that I found myself here, and that I can contribute and like just be as strange as I want to be, without any type of like judgment or anything like that. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah, man. I share both your sentiment. I think from the inside, it's really interesting. I agree as both as artists who have brilliant commentary on the space. I think the more material, the better, and the more absurd, the better. As for the community and culture, you know, I frequently tweet about this. I felt like a Martian my whole life. And then I met all you weird motherfuckers. And I was like, turns out weird motherfuckers.
Right.
The only concern I have, I'd say, is one of the big opportunities, I think, is how does the space grow over time and create more opportunity for everybody? Because I think the more opportunity and the more amazing, cool people come in, the more things we can do with this technology and frontiers we push. And so the only thing that sometimes like saddens me is like, you know, the absurd, it's sort of like your character can be like absurd and so on, but eventually like nobody respects you. And I think like trying to interface with the outside world, I just sometimes worry that between the, you know, exploding nosedive, like I never say I'm in NFTs. It's like you might as well tell people you're a fucking degenerate scumbag.
Right.
You know, literally, that's like I say I play like in digital art or Web3 or whatever. I hate Web3, WebG. But yeah, so that'd be my only like love your takes. Totally agree. I probably overly think about, you know, where are we going and how do we grow and how does this impact people? I always think like a lot of stuff in life, I always imagine another human being having to go tell somebody they love or go brag about it. I used to use that when I was in the corporate world. Like, let me give somebody something that they can go home and feel great about. So I think the flip side is like when you get these snippets all the time of like scumbaggery, stealing, some coin word name that's misspelled company name is worth fucking 200 million, and somebody sent fucking 4,000 ETH to a wallet.
Yeah.
So that'd be my only like simple, and probably that's my issue because like all markets need different stuff. But there's something, and I would reflect like, because I do this full time and I did do other stuff before and I want to feel proud. Somehow it's hard to like stay away from the stink. Die, you're up.
Well, what do you think? I mean, Jack, on that front, like, I guess for me, like, I don't, oddly, and I'm somebody who struggles with anxiety, pretty deep anxiety, and like, catastrophizing the future and stuff. But oddly, in here, I find myself just like every day, just thinking about the kind of, it's really kind of the immediacy of that day versus speculation on like what will happen. Like, I mean, certainly there's strategic things that you think about, but overall, it's just like I just don't really like what OG was saying. It's like I'm not super concerned with like onboarding the next whoever or whatever, because I think it'll just unfold naturally. Like I think people are going to be naturally attracted to whatever if it's interesting enough and cool enough, and like in you have the thing that you're doing and you're passionate about it, and you love it enough. I think that automatically just attracts whoever is going to automatically fuck with it. But I don't know, Jack, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, it's an interesting.
Well, 100% agree with that idea of like the onboarding meme is like just vaguely enough of a abstraction of like who's going to buy this for more than I paid for it. That really is what it refers to. And it's like, we're all kind of like, okay, well, let's call it onboarding because that sounds better. But in the same way,
Bro,
I guess the way I've thought about it, or the way that like the thing I love about it, or the thing that gets, I think, people stuck in the terminology is just like, this is just an internet native economy, right? People are not comfortable with that, or not used to that, or don't understand that like culture takes place on the internet arguably more than in the real world, right? It's like, if you think about the real estate of attention, just as a, like, I live in place X, but the majority of the things happening in my brain are distributed across the world in all these different places. Friends I have in different countries, whatever is going on, people I've never met, people who I think of as like an assembly of pixels, as a completely normalized thing. And we've been doing that for, like, the three of us on this call for a while. And I think like the desire to categorize that into a thing, it kind of comes back to all the shit I hated about being in the consulting world too, where it was like, what can we, like, we're Accenture, right? And it's like, this quarter is going to be about, and you can go back maybe 2 years and see metaverse being the thing being pumped incessantly by every like IT digital transformation agency, whatever and basically what they're saying is like, we need to invent some terminology to get people to like pay us to give them advice on this. But really, like you're saying, it's just a migration of like doing shit in the real world, in some real world, quote unquote, to doing things on the internet. And with the infrastructure that we're playing with, there are different like economic primitives at play. Like, if you believe spending time on the internet is valuable, and the objects that you would carry around with you, and there's some value to that, obviously, that has been established by people spending money and energy on it. It's so nascent that the headlines that sort of make it into the outside world are the most sensational, as is the case with every headline ever written, right? Like, Bored Apes are worth $600,000. So then somebody who had no interest in spending their day, night, everything on the internet is like, shit, I need to get a Bored Ape.
Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a guy who's in a cannabis deal with call me. He's like, yo, bro, you got to check out these apes. In like August.
I mean, I think it's our desire for like certainty or finality or definition of like, it is this, and this many people need to come and do this, and then we're all going to be saved. It's like, fuck, what are you talking about?
Yeah. We're all looking for,
Well, I think, I was just going to say, like, this is a big thing for me. My whole life, I had all these plans: married once, divorced, the plan, career plan. It all fucking like the unimaginable happened. And I was like, holy shit, this is just all fucking in my head, totally fucking made up. And I have no control over almost anything. But then I just started showing up every day. And, you know, my thing, be cool and do cool shit. Like, I'm like, okay, don't harm anyone. Like, do cool shit and be cool, you know? And then, look, I'm like, okay, what's the next day? And then, like, I organically, like, stuff appears. And honestly, I'm sort of like, old me would have like kicked the shit out of new me, been like, what the fuck, California horse shit are you talking about? But dude, I go to fucking it's a little more lately, but I'll go to any NFT event. I just like show up. And one of the guys in my project was like, yo, so what's your plan? Like, who are you gonna meet? I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? He's like, well, do you have a plan? I'm like, no, I'm gonna show up and see what the fuck happens. And then, so I think that's not to say you shouldn't have ideas and strategies, and I mean, we all, I know, think a ton and focus a ton on that, but it's a fundamental, I know what you're saying, it's a fundamental letting go to the universe. And maybe that's one of the common things a lot of us have in here, because it was revolutionary for me to do this. Like, imagine when people are like, yo, what the fuck are you doing? I'm like, I don't know, man. It feels right, but keep doing it.
Yeah. Well, you've talked about this before, OG, and Jack, it was an interesting word you used in terms of salvation, because I think we're all looking for not even religious salvation, but something to salvage from like whatever, like kind
meaningless,
kind of like pointless kind of tedious insect nature that we inherit. And so, like, if you can find some type of meaning in that makes you feel good and makes you, like, you know, fucking talk to people you wouldn't necessarily talk to. And in a world that seems like it's increasingly collapsing on us and that like isolation feels at an all-time high, it's strange to recede. It's strange and also in some ways beautiful to recede into your screen. It's also kind of killing us all, but then also, you know, like finding people who, yeah, want to talk shit with you and want to like, you know, explore the ideas that you do and find inspiration in the shit that you do. It's just like such a strange, I don't know what the word is for it. Like, it's just weird that the thing that is burning formative memories where we're like on Twitter all day, just like shitting, you know, out of like just consuming and shitting without any type of thought or feeling in many ways, is like killing us, but is also like the thing that's like the driving force for like the entire movement, that we're kind of a part of.
Okay.
I don't know. It's pretty wild. And with that, I mean, like, dude, so Jack, I gotta ask you, so yesterday I was dying. You had a little copy pasta run, so some grade A fucking, you know, Chef Boyardee copy pasta. Where there's like a very NPC.
Floors up, bro.
Yeah, there was a very NPC comment on, I forget what it was. Well, two things. So one,
Well, let's
yeah,
share the comments so everyone knows because they might not have seen it.
so there was a comment yesterday that said like, hey, your FP is down. Like, you need to think more about your FP or something. And it was just this like really dead, like it almost appeared as though it were written by a bot. Like it very well, it potentially could have been, because it was so like void of humanity or like feeling or anything that it was, but it got picked up and turned into copy pasta. And I wanted to get your take. Like, one, I think that there's a couple really special things that I like love about you and your art and what you do. Part of that is the community that you foster and like the people who are there that like fucking love this stuff so much that, like, you know, essentially euthanize the comment by turning into copy pasta and it becomes hilarious instead of like hurtful or whatever it is. So two questions. One, do you consider those? I mean, like I think as artists, like we're all pretty sensitive people. Like, I mean, like there's been people who have tried to dismantle some of my shit and I come back with just like completely insane stuff where like I don't think they want to talk to me anymore, and like that's kind of how I handle it. But it's not hurtful. So like,
You
one,
post more of that. You used to post more of those.
So one, do you find that stuff at all like do you find it hurtful at all, or is it easy to glaze over? And then two, how great is the feeling of having that thing shredded into copy pasta and like the overall copy pasta vibe? It's just like, yeah, I want to get both your takes on those.
I mean, the overall, the like copy pasta as a behavior is just like an incredible example of like the weird quirks of the culture itself, right? It's like where the amount of context you need to have to like read someone saying something that's like completely, in most cases, like the opposite of what they believe to be true.
Yes.
You like have to have a detector on for that. So first of all, like incredible. I think another like indication that what all of this stuff is real in a very like, that's kind of a perfect example of the value in this world. Is like all this context that's embedded in it. And then, like every time you read something negative about something that you spend your entire waking and sleeping life thinking about, is never not like frustrating or upsetting to read. And most of the time I'm like, I'll try and like, obviously if you're making something, your intention is not for it to be not valued by people who are purchasing it, right? That's not what I'm trying to do here.
Not right.
Hateful comments for that, you know.
Yeah.
And I think like another weird thing, I actually seen this like meta changing more like across all of this space. And this is like one of the things that I completely love about your work is like this kind of rejection of that narrative entirely, like embedded into what you're doing. And it's kind of like the absurdity of that hopefully is reflected, like the literal collection descriptions on checks and Opepen specifically are digs at that entire idea. This may or may not be notable. Like I'm some dude with a computer making these things. if people like it, then X happens. If they don't, then Y happens. And the same like commentary in O'Pepin is this idea of consensus being this temporary thing where, Bored Apes are on Jimmy Fallon one day, and then a year later they're being shredded to pieces by the people that mortgage their houses to buy them. Right. Absurd. This is an absurd thing. Like there's so much I could say on it, because even the idea that these things have prices in real time is like the most ridiculous leap forward in in price discovery and value and all that. Like buying
liquidity
art,
of assets at any point, you have a value of these assets. Like
it's
in
unbelievable.
Real time.
Like this is maybe the wrong thing to say, but it's like it's incredible to me that this is worth anything. It's like it's an amazing thing that there has been consensus established across this network that somebody wants to pay something for this, to the point where there's like a bid for several $100s, 24 hours a day, around the clock, globally. It's unbelievable. I'm incredibly grateful for that.
This part of what I want to get like you two on together is like, I hadn't realized until I dug in a bit, like the depth of your commentary and your satire, Jack. And one of the things actually that's happened to me is the ridicule, like you were saying, like seeing that these assets can be worth so much in an odd way has made me look at most assets and realize how much in the real world, almost, I hate to say it, like the more you peel it back, like almost everything's fucking scam, like law scam, like accounting scam, fucking. And I'm like, holy fuck, it's all like a fucking fugazi. And then you start there, you're like, okay, so this is just another fucking fugazi. And actually, oddly, it's that.
It's like it's sorry to interrupt you. It's like it's paradoxical in that fact that it is like the check mark specifically is like the perfect, in my mind, satirization of that. Otherwise, I never would have done this thing, right? This is the absurdity of it. You're trading status, this visual thing that is supposed to represent value that has been turned on its head and sold at $8 a pop. It's just a perfect encapsulation of the absurdity of like trading, any digital asset or piece of art peer to peer is this incredible thing, but it is a status, like it's this collective agreement on the status or the thing that represents. And there's obviously reasons why those things accomplish those things or are perceived that way. This is not me shitting on anybody's talent or ability or the quality of work, because that does precede all of these things. But if you really abstract it out to this layer, it's like we all agree this is valuable. Like Jalil and I, we just got invited to write a chapter in the Punks book. I went to Freeze a couple of years ago, like the art fair in New York, at the Deutsche Bank, VIP tents, hilarious, like like the little hors d'oeuvres being passed around. I'm trying to explain CryptoPunks to the like the fine art concierge of Deutsche Bank that like manages people's private collections and stuff. It's just like, even comparing those things like apples to apples, like, oh, you have this client that has this art collection that you keep in a free pour off the bed. Like, it doesn't even they don't have it in their house. They've probably never seen this shit, right? It's just like, it is a vehicle that has this consensus around it because it was, maybe an artist that lived 500 years ago and published all this work that's been exhibited X, Y, and Z. But as an instrument for what they're actually using it for, it's one of the worst things in the world. It's just like this incredible human ability to create a story and make it valuable enough and believable enough that this network of people have to keep you got to keep the consensus going for that to survive, right? And this, like the concept of a free port is just the most obscene. You got like paintings floating around in a shipping container, like off some dock somewhere for this tax rule and that tax rule and this like inheritance. It's like in this trust and it's going into like, oh my God, just insane.
Well, let's circle back, because we started earlier with talking about how much time is spent online. And then the disconnection, this is why I have a lot of hobbies like gardening and so on that reconnect me. But oddly, if you stand back and then say the old status used to be you'd have to physically walk in somewhere, people would look at like what you're wearing, what your watch was, what your this was, what car you came in. And people would pay a lot more to be identified with those items factually. So in the digital, like in what we do, only if you're like us, I think ultimately, if you have a project, you have to reveal yourself as a human, but you can choose to literally be like an image you bought and no association with your face, looks, race, gender, sexuality, anything. So then you have to come into this world, and it is truly global. Like I'm every day more than in any other position dealing with people. Like this morning, we dropped like a sneak peek of our token, and Bastian, who's my super homie, we met in person in London, but he lives in Prague. We're like best friends, fucking years hanging, you know, like for real. It's like this, like totally, you know, day to day. So you're now sending signals of like who you are, because the way humans learn is like I quickly have to decide like who am I meeting here, what is it? And so all these digital assets actually do become more important. Like my children live all fucking day like this on this shit, doing the latest TikTok, whatever bullshit. And so it makes more sense to me the more I think about it, that like, hey, look, this is a much more effective way to have assets. There's much more liquidity, which makes having an asset lower risk and more flexible and more accessible. And just like getting covered in tattoos or doing whatever the fuck, wearing black, fucking beard, you know, you're now recreating a you in this new place, and you have a name you've chosen. Everyone can see what you're doing all day. I always say, nothing should make you happier than transparency if you're a real motherfucker, because then you want people seeing what you're doing all the time. So I don't know. I come back to the absurdity and I flip it on its head. I'm like, some motherfucker paid $100,000 for some, piece of trunk so they could use it once and rap about it and throw it out and shit. Why is that any more absurd than me like trying to flex a crypto punk on a motherfucker? That's a signal of like, I'm not a tourist. This is what I'm about. Right or wrong, I find it increasingly less insane. And so oddly, it is all absurd. It's like we've talked about. You have to think something's absurd and insane, but like deeply love it and connect with it to actually vibe and do well there. So maybe that's my fucking telling myself, No,
it's 100% true. Like, I mean, you think you could make a rational argument for it before. It's like, I can't remember we said this before or after. I think it was in your intro where you said 100 people listening to you talk.
That was
this unbelievable, like, media as this like social leverage for people where you could live somewhere, have this interest that you happened upon on the internet, and then build a network of people that you would have zero opportunity to do in physical space. None. Right? I mean, the internet, not to go down a massive rabbit hole, but the only reason I'm doing what I'm doing is because of the internet. I was able to move to the States because of that, find a job, do all this stuff. Like the town I grew up in, without the internet, was not leading me here. Right. And this is like, there are technologists that have articulated it better than me, but we sort of take the internet as this like hyper established thing that's like, oh, this is kind of this is the internet as we will continue to know it. But that just feels like a complete miscalculation of how important and crazy and ridiculous the internet is as a like this parallel development alongside what we're doing our lives. Like, this is a complete like guess, but if you just think about the amount of importance people place on their personality or their appearance or their like network through a screen versus in person, almost maybe post-COVID, like for a lot of people that balance flipped, where it's like the digital became more of your life than the physical. And that's like, not to just use the vain components of that. It's like literally the human connections that you form, the time you spend, the work you do, the things you're proud of exist more in my career, at least on the internet, than they do in like physical world. And I think that's true for a lot of people. So all of this stuff, while it looks insane, is like, oh yeah, it's a very obvious symptom or conclusion of this huge shift in how we function as people.
And I've even found like actually I joke I got it from this guy to Birds who's gone now, but NFTs are new friend technology. And I actually live to come to the in real life stuff and hang. but like I can't. Increasingly, I like, and I'm a little older, and I can't hang with people who aren't in the space anymore. Not because I need to talk about NFTs, but their whole orientation. One other thing I just want to say, Jack, one of the interesting things, like reflecting on the internet and impact. I grew up, like fucking 49. So like I had no cell phone, no email, no none of this. And so my children and I discuss this a lot. And it's a funny thing. I'm like, you don't understand. Like there was when you were in your car, you just drove. Like if the TV, whatever was on, was on. When you had to call your parents, like you had to go to a payphone. I had a fucking typewriter when I was think about got a Smith Corona automatic screen where you could fucking old 49.
And that wasn't a choice for flexing purposes. The typewriter.
That was having a fucking sweet Corona with a digital screen. If you tell a motherfucker now, I was like with some other old motherfucker who was older than me. He worked with like Steve Jobs for 30 years and all this cool shit. And I told him, I was like, and I remember because he invented Unicode, this motherfucker. And I was telling him like Commodore 64, and then I got the Smith Corona. He's like, the one with the digital screen. I'm like, yeah, motherfucker. So, but you realize the impact on technology, attention, and how it like when I grew up, you'd sit at a dinner table, there was no phones. You'd like my dad would fucking talk or whatever. Now I'm like joking with my kids. I'm like, yo, I can't pry these motherfuckers off a screen for 2 minutes.
Right.
So I think this vast shift, and like you said, what we take for granted, the every fucking kid gets easier and easier, like for them to imagine this. Whereas you talk to some old motherfucker and they're like, what are you talking about? It's not even, you'll never have to convince. We talk going back to onboarding, like literally every kid who's grown up, who's under probably 25, this is so fucking natural to them. It's not even an extent, like there's nothing for them to think about. That's what I think as well.
Yeah, and just one thing I'll add to that is that, like, I saw Die's work. I don't know when I first saw your work. This is the first time we're talking video, voice, any of this stuff. Yeah, and it's like you just know when you see that stuff. Is like, this guy's gonna be funny as hell. I know I'm gonna like this guy. And you go back and forth like 5 messages, like, yeah, I was right, and then you like, it's just a ridiculous level of, like the ability to find people through this. And this is the weird thing about, like, there's such a contradiction to the world I came from, where it's like you feel like you have to explain everything. You're like, oh man, I have to talk about this endlessly to get someone to convince somebody that I'm correct about this, or get them to change how they see the world, to see it more like me. And this is the complete inversion of that. It's like, I'm going to make this shit that's just spewing out of me, and then people will find it and they will see in it what I saw, or a version of it, or be curious enough about it to want to talk about it more. And it's like, it's such a high bandwidth way to communicate. The like shaking, shitting portrait of the guy in the old people's home is like, that tells me more about you than a fucking 10,000 word essay that you write about yourself. It's just there.
I do want to riff off that. Before I do, though, when I first met Di, I think September 22, I reached out to you. Di, does that sound about right?
Yeah,
and
it does.
Back when he used to post a lot more of the DMs. I wasn't thinking this guy's going to be funny. I'm like, this guy is either going to be like, in my head, I'm like, this guy's probably going to be the weirdest motherfucker I've ever met in my life. And maybe a fucking, because, I mean, it was a lot more of the DMs back then. Remember, Di?
Yeah.
Where he would just like, it was the funniest shit. Like people would DM him any request, and then Di would just start fucking, So then I first talked to him. I'm like, God damn it, this dude's the fucking best ever. And I've been blessed with a super tight relationship with him. But yeah.
Thanks, it's funny. Well, it's kind of funny because, like, I don't know. I think that I think there's a certain portrayal, like we were saying, it's like the ability to do anything you want online is so beautiful, because you can have this exaggerated version of yourself that certainly is also yourself, just an extension or like a different portion that you're exploring and like, trying to figure out, and whether that is like this like kind of depraved, mad, insane like aspect of it. It's like, I feel like, if any of us were like that all the time, it would be so unbearable. Like, can you imagine if Jack and you guys were talking to me and I was like, Oh, like, talking about like just pounding flashlights and like fucking like shit. Like, just like, it would be an unbearable conversation to have. So I think
Wait, is
it's like nice to be able to
that how
have like
it
a
is
little.
now? I thought that's what it was like.
Right. Well, that's the next question. Is favorite
Yeah.
flashlight model. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hilarious. I'm stoked to be able to talk to like, and I think that so when I look at your stuff, Jack, it's like, and what I love so much about it is like dude, the people who love and fuck with your art are like ravenous fuckers, dude. Like I posted that fucking fuckable Opepin, and it had like fucking 14,000 views. Like
Well,
people were going nuts about it, and it's like
because
I
Jack's
think that
training
that's his.
users to want to interact, like to fuck with Jack. You can't just be passive. You have to do stuff. It's actually interesting. So, sorry to interrupt, but I think like you throw something to them, they're like fucking doing the DMs to each other and shit, like analyzing. Sorry, go ahead, Di.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say, I love, it's like the ravenous hordes of people is like my favorite thing in the world, like, and when you can create something that like is that inspiring that like fuels that in someone's life and they find, some type of meaning or like some I don't know, like we talked about before, some type of like almost salvation, whether again, not having that be potentially life changing salvation, but if it's like even gives them a moment of a moment of happiness during their day, I think that's what like, and that is the perfect loop back to what we were talking about before with like the 100 views on YouTube or like the 2 likes on anything that you post or whatever. It's like, it's not to be corny, but I was making shit forever before this, and it was just nobody ever liked it at all. Nobody ever did anything with it. I wrote 200,000 word books that nobody ever read. I'm like,
Dude,
I
six
just, I
books.
don't, I don't really care. Like, it just didn't matter. But then, when you think about that, and like, I think that there's when you look at who is, experiencing that, even if for a moment, if it changes their day, if it like makes them again happy or sad or fucked up, or they find some relation to it in how they grew up or something, it's like those are those moments I think we glaze over quite a bit, but it's the things that are truly like the threads that are kind of holding this whole thing together. So I don't know. I found that to be cool. Like your ability to create art that unites, folks is just it's pretty fucking rad, dude. So just a hats off there.
Well, I
Thank
want
you,
to
mate. I
extend
appreciate that.
That's crazy, Di. Yeah, I think your work, much of art to me is a conversation with the heart of the soul that's not in words. I look back and you had a show visualizing value, and I like simply love the concept of like how you were visually basically teaching people a summary and in a super effective way. And I've thought that the visual presentation of information is one of the most powerful tools to either understand or to actually like, you know, basically pull one over on people if it's presented in a certain way. So I look at your art and think it started from what I call more out of the head rather than maybe out of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And is that and so Di's right. Like one of the things, again, when Cheggs was coming up and I was so dumb I can barely do a air claim, like a fucking claim. So solving puzzles. I'll be talking to Peter. I said, we should try to solve this puzzle. I'm like, are you fucking kidding, bro? I don't even know how to like read the puzzle. So sorry, I was thinking that fuck, I lost my train of thought.
The heart and the soul you were talking about, and the
focus on the head and your art is coming out of that. Can you talk? Is that right? Is that a fair depiction? You think like usually art that's not soul based, like art that's not as soul based, doesn't connect and engage, but yours has done so. So how do you think? Because you look at your art, it does have soul. I like it's not soulless. Just being so it's a really interesting thing. It's created from the head, and I would have thought, okay, this is just like PowerPoint presentation at first when I looked, and I'm like, holy fuck, like now I see why this motherfucker's done so well. So I just love to learn because I don't know many artists. I mean, there's coding and so on, but this is literally like I am presenting a fucking idea in the best possible way through art. So
yeah, man. Well, I appreciate it. I think like, and I would agree, and maybe that's like was an insecurity of mine at one point, right? I was never the like going to work and then going home and being like, here's these like portraits in this different medium that really is like how I express my soul, you know?
Yeah,
Never
exactly.
in my life have I had that like
Yeah, bro. Yeah, totally,
distinction.
totally.
I'm like, fuck, I happen to be really good at this thing that sometimes is like boring as fuck, most of the time, right? Like doing this stuff. But it was like puzzles for me when I was working in corporate advertising. It was like, you know, figuring out the most succinct way to like explain this back to this person that can't communicate it very well, or is trying to find a better way to communicate it. It's like turn that into this little puzzle. Like corporate ad culture in the right agency is fun as hell. Like you're flying around, staying in nice hotels, like boozing. Like this is like a fun lifestyle that I had at a certain point. I was like, got so I would go through these like 9-month stints of like I'd work at one agency. It would be like I'd burn out on whatever client list they had there and be like, okay, this is boring. I've solved the problem. I want to go do something else. And just got to this point where I was like, man, I really want to work for myself. Like, I don't want to do this for other people. I really want to work for myself. I like don't want to be told where to be, what to do, what time I have to be on the phone, blah, blah, blah. And in that sense, I do think the early work is like probably the most soul bearing stuff that I've ever done, is like me trying to make the transition from somebody telling me what to do and producing this thing that goes in my portfolio to like, here's this object that I'm putting out into the world that's basically asking you, please see value in what I'm doing. Please hire me to make you a fucking PowerPoint presentation or whatever it was at the point in time. And that to me was like way more of like vulnerable position to be in, where like all your friends are like stuck with their Fortune 500 jobs or back at home where you grew up and are doing what they've been doing for however long they've been doing it. And like to go back to Die's comment, like I would post this shit on Facebook at the time. My mom is the only person liking it. I'm there like just blasting through my savings account, sitting on my ass in my apartment. Like, fuck, what have I done, man? Like the green corporate Amex is cut up, is in the bin. I'm like, what have I done? And it just took so many iterations to get to a point where even like the business side of that creative work was like even remotely making a living. And then visualize value was like, this is the moment in time where I went from like just doing everything to everyone to just picking something and being like, okay, I'm pretty good at this. This very specific visual style seems to be resonating with people. I'm not going to change anything. I'm just going to use that as the filter that I put all my ideas through. And it was at this time where I was like trying to read just as much information as I could to get myself out of the hole I was in, basically. So I was reading like technologists, marketers, people that had done what I was trying to do. And the ideas that started to resonate with me from what they'd written. That's a visual. How frequently? I was posting like 5 a day, 6 a day I was making. I would go to a coffee shop in Brooklyn. I would have a book with me. And I would just blast them. Like there's 1,000 of them on Instagram. And there was like, I was doing 5 of them a day. And then like that became its own little thing for a while. I was doing that with clients, and then built like a decent community off just doing that on Instagram, where people would subscribe to it and look at them every day. And a few of the people I met in 2020 were like, hey, I want to collect these. And I'm like, what the fuck? What are you talking about? Collect them? Like, on Instagram. I tried to actually go to this. I have a tweet of this somewhere. I went to an art fair in Queens. I spent like $1,000 on these screen prints on black paper, white ink on black paper. I went to this art fair, got invited, which was just basically this complete fucking scam that I didn't see at the time. It was like, I'm sure you've experienced this, where like DM you on Instagram, like, we'd love to exhibit your work. And I'm like, fuck, I made it. And there's like, you have to sell 50 tickets. You have to fill this booth. This is the rental price. I didn't see it at the time. I was too, like, I don't know, disillusioned at the time. I went to this thing and the people just walk past and they're just like, what the fuck is that? You know? And that again is like this comparison between the real world, quote unquote, and the internet, where it's like the 10 people that followed me on Instagram appreciated that 10,000 times more than 5 random people walking in off the street in Queens. It's like the world, that was like the turning point in my head. It's like the world has just changed completely. Like the ability for you to build that network natively on the internet, those people care about this shit 100 million times more. Then maybe you get one person that's like curious and you have a bit of a conversation with them, but they're looking at 2 prints. The people that follow you on Instagram have seen 500 pieces of your work. It's like they speak your language, like the entire culture of that is different. So yeah, from that perspective, sorry, I'm rambling on, but this idea of like,
no worries.
That was me just like in the most vulnerable position possible, where I was like, if this doesn't work, I have to basically go back with my tail between my legs and be like, I couldn't do it on my own. Give me another Verizon fucking banner ad to design, please.
Dude, it's funny because we both create. So I currently create digital waste for a living in my 9 to 5. We have that in common. Like I'm literally I'm a spam email marketer. So like, it's so funny, dude. Like, I don't know. There's something so dread inducing in just like, I mean, dude, I always describe it as like, we're kind of melting in our desk chairs and becoming lubricant for the wheels of the next sorry fuck to take our place. And that's just what most of us are sentenced. That's our sentence, though. That's like what we're. That's
you're
what
right. You're right.
To do, and that's like the salvation that most will succumb to. And that was my plan all along. It's like, all right, sweet. I'll die alone doing something I hate. This is what the life. This is the life. And this
Club 2024. Die with the most likes.
Right. Right. It's just strange, but do you find that? And I feel like with the pieces that you have and like the dismantling you do of certain concepts and like just certain methodologies, do you find that your cynicism and inability to create meaningful satire was part of that dead job? Like, because I feel like when you've been beaten down into smithereens, it's when you start becoming this like insane cynic, and you start just like making fun of everything and giving everything shit, because that's the only thing you can find joy in sometimes,
Well, all of life you can't grow without pain. If everything's easy, you're not gonna change it.
So, you know what's funny though is like I think the tone of it is like there's like this positive cynicism to it. If I would, and that's not up to me to describe that. That's obviously whoever is.
I would agree. I agree. Yeah.
It's like this idea of like you have to sort of borrow some of that accepted symbology and like decorum and things of that nature. And it's like if you dig a little bit deeper intellectually, it's like you're taking the piss out of all of it. It's like
for sure.
The idea, I think, that like most people, and that was my experience in the agency world, is like there's a guy wrote an essay, I forget his name, called Bullshit Jobs. If you know, and my whole vendetta in life, I think, or the thing that I am so like sort of positively angry about, I guess, is talented, creative people making Verizon banner ads, or spending their life doing this bullshit.
That's thing in our prep call. You said, "Sell the dream, but deliver the nightmare."
Sell the dream, deliver the nightmare. That was
I love that.
That was the motto internally of the agency businesses I worked at, where you would put all this energy into pitching this incredible vision, right? You'd send the best team you possibly had in there, CEOs in there, like, hey, here's my personal cell number. Call me anytime. We're going to knock this out of the park. You get back to the office, it's like, who's the cheapest labor intern we can get on this job? Put them on it now. And bill the fuck out of these guys. And like, I'm sitting there like, what are we doing, guys? This is like, our incentives are completely misaligned. And just like, I kept switching jobs when I realized, I was like, oh man, and this is not me saying everybody doing that work is doing this. Obviously there are lots of good people in that world, but just fundamentally the whole premise of it was so just so depressing. We lost this job. We pitched for 3 months because this guy plays golf with somebody else. Like, what the fuck are we doing?
That's what I mean. It's all fugazi, bro.
It is.
Oh fuck.
Unless you're like building bridges or developing.
For sure.
There are many jobs in the world that and we like. I guess I don't know how old you are, Di, but I'm 35.
I'm 37.
So like. Yeah, so like the age at which I grew up is like work on computers was just like, oh, You have to work on computers, guys. Like
That's what
this
it
is
is.
like,
Yeah, there's nothing right. Which is which is insane. Yeah.
Incredibly, like, and this is like maybe study computer science would have been good advice, but like get a graphic design job or work as a marketer, or like the fact that there are like universities charging fucking 200 grand for a marketing degree, to me is a criminal. That's like a criminal enterprise. Like, what are you guys doing? For somebody to get out and get like an entry level job and have been taught for the most part by people who have never fucking been able to sell anything in their life. Like, it's a criminal thing, right? And there's so like information worker or whatever, a knowledge worker. We're now like, even in the last 3 or 4 years, the speed at which that shit is just getting blown out of the water. Like when I started working in agencies, we would charge $5 million for an e-commerce website. Literally like 100 times shitter than a Shopify template at the time. It was like, we need to build a custom one to fit your brand. And guys, you got to do it.
Yeah.
You got to invest.
Brand,
the next day after it's launched, the day after it launches, the conversion rate's down 50%. And everyone's like, well, this is the cost of innovation, guys. Just. And that's why I think people are disillusioned, is because they're in these jobs where it's like, you see one thing and you're being told something else.
Yeah.
Like you see what you're doing is not making any difference. And you're told, oh,
yeah.
Horrible.
Which is a huge change from history. Like most of history in America was like private companies. And now, so almost most people you meet work in big corporations. Corporations work on politics and, claiming victories. Because if you're only in a job for 2 years, what the fuck can you really do? I've been doing this for 3 years and I barely fucking can do this. You know what I mean? Like, so then you move to the next one and claim it creates this literally, and actually there's a disincentive to improve anything because
there is
complaining, saying it's wrong. Thus, you now are blaming some motherfuckers, and even if it gets better, your pay isn't any different. So you just fall into this fucking zombie where you like the incentives are so fucked up, and you're just like trying to get the next title and claim some other shit, and then the other sad shit. Like I have no problem with people buying companies and like shutting them down, but it's just I never want to do that because like then you show up one day, you've been working like 22 years and somebody buys your company and shuts down everybody and fires you. You didn't do shit. It's just kind of like fucking terrible. I find it really like sad and frustrating.
Dude, well, have you guys read that CIA? It was like a leaked. I recommend everybody read this thing because it's really fucking funny. It's like it's the CIA document that got leaked that was like for people who were against obviously like the Nazis, but it was how to like destroy productivity in Germany at the time. And it was all the stuff that we just do at companies now, where it's like schedule as many meetings as humanly possible, blame other people 24/7. It was like it was this like really beautiful idea in order to like shut down all the companies. Yeah, it was, and I was like, what? I was like, dude, this is it's so good. It's like really, really funny, and it was just so funny that it was written all those years ago to dismantle the Nazis, and it's and for some reason like that's like what everyone does now in terms of inefficiency and just sits there, and it's wild.
Well, I now have like a satirical take on that. Like Sergito, I call him Sergito is what I was calling him. Sergito. He does like announcements, and at first I was like, what the fuck? I love the absurdity of like announcing an announcement. So I find actually like a joy stepping back for a minute again. I think there's just a fundamental joy of being part of this culture where it's like, yo, you fucking clowns, like I'm gonna sit here and make fun of you, but at the same time, like, I appreciate how you made a connection between us. Like, so I love that kind of like just absurdity and to fuck with it,
Yeah, I mean, I like absolutely. The absurdity of this in my mind is like it's absurd in the context of what everybody else, well, not everybody else, but like the world I come from spends time doing, in that people think it's more silly to spend time like literally creating things that represent what you care about, what you love, and like being able to exchange those with other people is like, that's what you're going to clown on versus like logging in to fucking make banner ads for, sorry, I keep using Verizon as example here,
Great.
but that
Just
was like
pummeling Verizon. He's a T-Mobile. He's getting a T-Mobile boost,
Yeah,
dude. This is his like. Yeah, he's getting
again points.
Yeah, on the take from T-Mobile.
You're not
I am
wrong
on
though.
T-Mobile.
You're
Yeah.
absolutely not wrong, because whenever you say that, like whenever even with, and it's so insane how much people just don't understand about it, because it's kind of like OG was saying at the start, and it's probably a good place to like start rapping, but it's like when people ask what you do, you say like, oh, digital art, and then they go, oh no, NFTs, and and it's like, dude, like it's yes, that is the technology we use in order to like be able to like sell this stuff, but it's just not like it's such a crazy misunderstanding that people people refuse to acknowledge. And then I think the other part about that is that people are completely indifferent, or they're happy to shit on that, even though you're excited and happy to tell them that you're making digital and selling. But like that ability to just dismantle and shit on it.
Normies, though, that's why. Once you
Real
have to
life
start,
copy pasta right there.
Yeah, it's copy. It is. It really is copy paste.
Yeah, it's copy paste.
Yeah.
By the way, I want to give a shout out for those who may have noticed. That's a mini OG doll right there, and that is the stolen meat can. So check it.
Nice, dude.
This meat can was stolen by me in Marfa.
Right.
Oh, we were wondering what happened to that. Oh my
I
god.
told you that Pindar and Di, we were hanging out after assembling the glory hole, and Pindar made two, and I'm like, well, what are you gonna do the second one? He's like, throw it out. I'm like, fuck no, you aren't. And I grabbed it. So then I go, next day I show up, Chris, all you guys were talking about it, like, yo, where'd that go? I'm like, motherfuckers, I took it. So
Yeah, we were
questions 9/10, baby. And then this
right.
is when my last job.
Wow, look at that.
When I left the management team, I used to run a paint company, a powder paint company. And they made
Is that thing fuckable?
Yeah, it actually is. It's just fucking. It's not fuckable.
Yeah, okay. Right, nice.
Bro.
Nice,
well,
dude.
I can't say what a fucking joy. Like, one of the best parts of this show is, like, Jack and I got to chat for like an hour and a half last week, and we're hanging out today. And, we talk a lot about culture and community on this show. And to me, this is what it's like about. Like, how fun is this to find some crazy motherfuckers who want to talk about this insane shit and not have us having to explain every fucking, no, this is why this, yeah, and it's like, fuck. So, you guys have any comments or thoughts before we wrap it up? We have the most live viewers. 1,500 live viewers, which is
incredible.
That's fucking nuts. Yeah.
Man, thank you to everybody spending their time on this too. Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah,
seriously.
So fucking thankful for all you don't understand. Like, I think that's one of the most watched in NFTs, period. So
crazy.
Anyway, I'm so thankful. And I think, like, look, this is what it's about, like us hanging out and people hanging out with us. And so thank you all. Thanks, Jack and Di, as always. And like, look forward to more chatting and bullshitting.
Fuck yeah, dude. Thank you all.
I'm shitting. I'm fucking sorry, bro. All right. Love you guys.
Later, dudes. Yeah, cheers.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Stay on for a minute.